The chandeliers glittered like frozen stars, casting a cold light across the grand ballroom. Laughter rippled through the crowd of the city's richest, their champagne glasses clinking in perfect rhythm. This was not just any night. It was the charity gala of the year, the place where fortunes were flaunted and reputations were built. At the center of it all stood Damien Mitchell, a billionaire whose arrogance filled every corner of the hall. His tuxedo was flawless, his smile sharper than a knife, and his arm was wrapped possessively around Roxanne Croft, the woman everyone whispered about. She was not his wife. She was his mistress. But just when Damien thought the night was his stage, the ballroom doors opened. All eyes turned as Ava Mitchell walked in. 6 months pregnant, dressed in a modest gown that couldn't hide the weight of exhaustion on her face, she held her head high despite the whispers. She was his real wife. The murmurs grew louder. Isn't that his wife? What's she doing here? Look at her belly. Ava had not come for drama. She had come because she believed her husband still cared enough to remember the woman carrying his child. She wanted to save what little was left of her marriage. She approached Damien carefully, her hand resting on her stomach. "Damien, we need to talk," she whispered, her voice trembling but determined. Instead of compassion, Damien sneered. "Not here, Ava. Don't embarrass me." His friend smirked. Roxanne's red lips curled into a triumphant smile. Ava tried again, pleading for just a few minutes, but Damien's pride had no limits. In one brutal motion, he shoved her aside with his foot, kicking her swollen belly. A gasp tore through the crowd. Glasses froze midair, cameras flashed, and the music screeched to a halt. Ava fell to the marble floor, her body curling around her unborn child, tears streaming down her face. The shame, the pain, the humiliation, all of it burned into her heart. Yet Damien didn't flinch. He turned back to his guests, raising his glass as if nothing had happened. "Let's not ruin the evening," he said coolly, pretending his pregnant wife wasn't lying in agony at his feet. People whispered, some horrified, some pretending not to notice. But one man at the far corner of the hall did notice. His eyes followed Ava as she struggled to breathe, his jaw tight with something more than pity. His name was Liam Cross. No one in the room knew yet, but this night would change everything. And in that single moment, Ava's silent tears became the spark of a revenge that would shake the entire city. Before that terrible night at the gala, Ava Mitchell's life had been a delicate illusion. On the surface, she seemed like the picture of a lucky woman, married to one of the city's richest men, carrying his child, living in a mansion overlooking Central Park. To outsiders, she was blessed. But behind the glass walls of that luxurious home was a woman slowly being erased. Ava had not come from wealth. She grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a mechanic. Her childhood was filled with secondhand clothes, scraped knees, and the smell of her father's old garage. But what she lacked in luxury, she gained in resilience. She excelled in art, painting late into the night with brushes that cost more than her weekly allowance. College was her dream, and she earned a scholarship with sheer determination. That was where she first believed she was building her own destiny. Then came Damien Mitchell. He was dazzling, magnetic, the kind of man who could silence a room with his presence. Ava met him at a charity auction while she was working part-time as an art curator. He had been one of the wealthiest donors, and he noticed her immediately. Within weeks, their whirlwind romance began. Lavish dinners, weekend getaways, promises whispered under moonlight. Ava, inexperienced in the ways of the wealthy, fell headfirst into what she thought was love. When Damien proposed, she believed her fairy tale had come true. She traded her small apartment for a penthouse, her modest dreams for his grand empire. For a time, she thought she had found safety, but the cracks showed quickly. Damien's affection turned to criticism. His sweet promises twisted into biting remarks. He complained that she didn't fit into his world, that she lacked the polish and pedigree his friends expected. Ava tried to adapt, changing her clothes, her speech, even her mannerisms, until she barely recognized herself in the mirror. Then came the pregnancy. At first, Ava believed it would be their salvation. Damien seemed thrilled, telling her he wanted a son to carry his legacy. For a few brief weeks, she saw glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with. But soon the reality set in. Damien did not want a partner. He wanted a trophy. Her pregnancy became another inconvenience, another reason to mock her swollen ankles, her tired eyes, her slower steps. Ava endured in silence. She told herself it was temporary, that once the baby arrived, things would change. She poured all her love into the life growing inside her, shielding her unborn child from the cruelty outside. But deep inside, fear gnawed at her. She was isolated, no close family nearby, no real friends left. Damien controlled her accounts, her schedule, even her access to doctors. The mansion was not a home. It was a gilded cage. And yet, Ava still clung to hope. That was why she walked into the gala, stomach heavy with new life, believing that if she faced Damien in public, maybe, just maybe, he would remember his humanity. She thought she could remind him of the vows they once shared. Instead, she was humiliated in front of the entire city. Now, lying in a hospital bed after the brutal kick, Ava faced a truth she could no longer ignore. The man she had sacrificed everything for wanted her gone. She was broke, powerless, and pregnant, with no one to turn to, or so she thought. Because in the shadows of her downfall, a man named Liam Cross was about to step forward, and his entrance would change Ava's fate forever. New York City had always been a place of contradictions. Beneath the towering glass skyscrapers and glittering penthouses lay stories of heartbreak and betrayal. For the elite, the city was a playground, a stage for power, wealth, and spectacle. And no event embodied this stage better than the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala. It was not just a fundraiser, it was a declaration of status, a chance for the richest families to remind the world that they ruled it. The ballroom shimmered that night, drenched in golden light from chandeliers imported from Vienna. Waiters in crisp white jackets glided across the marble floor with silver trays of champagne and oysters. The orchestra played Mozart softly in the background, but the real music of the evening was the hum of money. Investors whispering about their next billion-dollar deals, women comparing the sparkle of their diamonds, and men boasting about political favors owed to them. Damien Mitchell thrived in this world. He had clawed his way to the top, not by kindness but by ruthless ambition. His empire stretched across skyscrapers, luxury hotels, and private islands. He wasn't just a man of wealth, he was a man who demanded to be feared. To the business community, Damien was untouchable. To the social elite, he was the king they bowed to. Yet behind his polished tuxedo and charming smile, Damien's arrogance was like poison. He paraded Roxanne Croft on his arm that evening, as if she were the crown jewel he had earned. Roxanne, young and ambitious, knew how to play the part. She wore a crimson gown cut daringly low, her hand clinging to Damien's arm as she laughed too loudly at his jokes. For the cameras, they were perfect. A glamorous couple who belonged on the front page of every magazine. The irony was sharp. While Damien basked in the glow of chandeliers, Ava lay in a hospital room, fighting to keep her unborn child safe. The same city that celebrated Damien's empire had no idea of the monster he truly was. Or perhaps they did, but they preferred to look away. In this glittering world, appearances were everything, and sympathy was in short supply. Every corner of the gala was a reminder of how far Ava had been erased. The women she once dined with whispered cruelly about her absence. The men who used to greet her with respect now pretended she didn't exist. To them, she was a disposable chapter in Damien's story, a fragile woman who couldn't keep up with the pace of his empire. And still, Damien smiled. He shook hands with senators, toasted with Wall Street giants, and whispered promises of future deals. He was untouchable, or so he thought. Because somewhere among the glitter and the laughter stood Liam Cross. Unlike the others, he wasn't dazzled by Damien's empire. Liam had known Damien once, back when ambition hadn't yet turned him into a monster. Tonight, as he watched Damien bask in his false glory, Liam's eyes carried something rare in that ballroom: disgust. The gala raged on, louder and more dazzling, as though nothing had happened. But beneath the glitter lay a fracture, invisible yet growing. For Damien, the night was a victory lap. For Ava, it was the darkest moment of her life. And for Liam, it was the beginning of something neither Damien nor Roxanne could have predicted. Because when power builds its castle too high, all it takes is one spark to burn it down. And that spark was already waiting. Damien Mitchell was not always a billionaire. He had started out as a man with nothing but ambition and charm. In his early days, he knew how to play humble, how to wear the mask of a hardworking dreamer. But money had changed him, or maybe it had revealed the darkness that was always there. By the time his empire stretched across half of Manhattan, Damien no longer needed to pretend. He believed himself invincible. Cruelty became his favorite weapon. With Ava, he used it like a scalpel, slicing away at her self-worth piece by piece. He called her weak when she cried. He mocked her background, saying she should be grateful he had lifted her out of poverty. Even her pregnancy was not spared. He sneered that she looked like a burden with swollen feet. Each word was designed to keep her small, silent, dependent. And yet, Damien could charm the world outside. At business meetings, he was polished and persuasive. At the gala, he was magnetic, commanding every gaze in the room. This duality, devoted husband in public, tyrant in private, was his greatest manipulation. He knew people only believed what glittered. Beside him stood Roxanne Croft, the mistress who had become his shadow. Unlike Ava, Roxanne didn't want love. She wanted power. Ambition burned in her eyes, and she saw Damien not as a man, but as a ladder. She was 26, clever enough to hide her hunger behind a smile, bold enough to take risks others wouldn't dare. When Damien flaunted her in front of the elite, she felt untouchable. But their relationship was built not on trust, but on poison. Damien liked Roxanne because she fed his ego. She laughed at his cruel jokes, clung to his arm like a trophy, and whispered flattery that kept his arrogance alive. In return, he gave her diamonds, designer gowns, and a spotlight. To him, she was disposable. To her, he was a means to rewrite her destiny. The night Damien kicked Ava was the night their alliance became dangerous. Roxanne's smirk as Ava fell to the floor said it all. She had won, or so she thought. In her mind, Ava was finished, erased, forgotten. She didn't realize that cruelty always plants seeds of destruction. Behind closed doors, Damien and Roxanne were even more ruthless. He promised her that Ava would be taken care of, legally. He boasted that Ava had no money, no family, and no power to fight back. Roxanne giggled, sipping her champagne, dreaming of the day she would replace Ava as Mrs. Mitchell. She imagined herself in Ava's place, draped in wealth, mother to Damien's heir, her name etched into the city's social circles. But ambition has a cost. Roxanne underestimated two things: Ava's hidden strength and Damien's loyalty, because Damien had none. The same cruelty he inflicted on Ava was waiting for her too. She just hadn't tasted it yet. As the gala carried on, Damien whispered into Roxanne's ear, "This is our world now. Nothing and no one can touch us." His words were smug, dripping with the pride of a man who thought himself untouchable. Yet in a quiet corner of the ballroom, Liam Cross listened, his expression unreadable. He had seen men like Damien rise, and he had seen them fall. And as he watched Roxanne bask in borrowed glory, Liam knew her hunger would one day consume her. What Damien and Roxanne didn't know was that Ava's silence wasn't surrender. It was the calm before a storm that would destroy them both. The morning after the gala, New York awoke buzzing with whispers. By sunrise, the story had already slipped through the velvet curtains of the elite and spilled into the streets. The tabloids feasted on it, spinning headlines with ruthless precision. Mitchell gala drama, pregnant wife causes scene. Damien Mitchell humiliated by emotional spouse. Socialite Ava Mitchell spirals at charity event. The truth, the brutal kick, the tears, the gasps of the horrified crowd, was nowhere to be found. Money had done its job. Damien's public relations team moved faster than lightning, silencing witnesses, buying off photographers, and planting new narratives. Instead of being a victim, Ava was painted as a hysterical woman desperate for attention. Inside her hospital room, Ava scrolled through the news on her phone, her hands trembling. Each headline cut deeper than the bruise blooming on her ribs. She wanted to scream that it was all lies. She wanted to beg the world to see what really happened. But she couldn't. Damien controlled the media, and his reach was limitless. Her phone buzzed with messages, not of comfort, but of betrayal. Old friends she once dined with sent polite but cold texts. "I hope you're okay. Maybe it's best to keep a low profile." Others didn't bother hiding their disdain. "Ava, why would you cause such a scene while pregnant?" Even her distant relatives, who had once been proud of her marriage, now whispered that maybe she wasn't stable enough to be Damien's wife. Damien, meanwhile, played his role perfectly. Photographs of him leaving the gala hand in hand with Roxanne flooded the internet. He looked calm, even protective, as though shielding her from the chaos his wife had allegedly caused. The contrast was devastating. To the public eye, Damien was the graceful billionaire, and Ava was the unstable woman falling apart. It was betrayal layered upon betrayal. The city she once thought admired her now mocked her. The man who vowed to protect her turned her into a punchline, and the child she carried was now bound to a scandal that smeared their very existence. Still, Ava refused to break. She placed her hand on her swollen stomach, whispering softly to the life inside her, "I'll protect you. I don't know how yet, but I will." Her voice cracked, but her resolve hardened. She realized that the world might never hand her justice freely. She would have to take it, yet taking it seemed impossible. Damien had silenced witnesses, paid off newspapers, and crushed her image in less than 24 hours. And now she had nothing. No money, no home, no allies. Or so she believed. Because as Ava stared out the hospital window at the city skyline, a knock came at the door. When she turned, she didn't see a nurse or a doctor. She saw a tall figure, sharp-eyed, carrying a quiet intensity. It was Liam Cross. And the words he was about to speak would offer Ava a glimmer of hope in a world that had turned its back on her. The hospital room was silent except for the faint beeping of the monitor. Ava sat propped against the pillows, her hands wrapped protectively around her belly. The physical pain from Damien's kick had dulled to a constant ache, but the emotional wound was far sharper. Shame, betrayal, fear. They pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. When Liam Cross entered, she barely looked up. She had no energy left for polite greetings or curious questions. Her world had already crumbled. He stood by the doorway for a moment, studying her quietly, before pulling a chair to her bedside. "You don't know me well," Liam began, his voice calm but steady. "But I know what happened last night. And I know it wasn't you who caused the scene." Ava's lips trembled. For hours, she had been drowning in lies spun by the media. Hearing someone state the truth felt like oxygen. Yet suspicion lingered. "Why should I trust you?" she whispered. "Everyone else has already taken his side." Liam leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Because I've seen men like Damien before. They rise fast, they shine bright, but they always fall. And when they do, it's never gentle." His words carried a weight that made Ava's chest tighten. But the comfort was fleeting. Hours later, when Liam left to make some calls, Ava found herself spiraling again. The nurse brought her discharge papers. She realized with a jolt that she had nowhere to go. Damien had frozen her accounts, stripped her of credit cards, and thrown her out of the mansion. She was, for the first time since meeting him, truly alone. She wandered out of the hospital with a small plastic bag of belongings, her hand clutching her swollen belly. The autumn wind bit at her face, cruel and indifferent. She hailed a cab, but when the driver asked for a destination, her mind went blank. There was no home to return to, no family to run toward. For the first time in her life, Ava Mitchell had no place in the world. The cab dropped her off at a shabby motel. The neon sign buzzed, half of the letters flickering out. She paid with the last crumpled bills she had hidden in her purse. Inside the room, the wallpaper peeled, and the sheets smelled faintly of mildew. It was a far cry from the marble floors and silk curtains of Damien's mansion. But as she lay on the thin mattress, she realized something terrifying. She might not survive this. Her body shook as she sobbed into the pillow. She thought of her unborn child, fragile and innocent, caught in a war it never asked for. For a fleeting moment, Ava wondered if it would be easier to give up, to surrender completely, to stop fighting a battle she could never win against a man like Damien. But then her phone buzzed. A message appeared on the cracked screen. "I know where you are. Don't worry, you're not alone." It was Liam. Somehow he had found her. Somehow he wasn't letting her disappear into the shadows. And the next move he made would drag Ava back into a fight she thought she had already lost. The motel room was dim, the buzzing neon light from outside leaking through the cracked blinds. Ava sat on the bed, her hands clutching her stomach as though holding herself together. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Fear had become her shadow, and despair her only companion. But then came the knock at the door. Firm, steady, relentless. Ava froze. For a second, she thought it might be Damien's men, come to drag her back, silence her, or worse. With trembling fingers, she opened the door a crack. It was Liam Cross. He stood tall, wearing the same calm expression as at the hospital, though his eyes carried something heavier tonight, determination. Without asking permission, he stepped inside, shutting the door firmly behind him. In his hand was a leather briefcase, worn at the edges but locked tight. "You shouldn't be here," Ava whispered, panic rising in her chest. "If Damien finds out—" "He already thinks you're finished," Liam interrupted. His voice was low, steady. "That's what makes this the perfect moment." From the briefcase, he pulled out a stack of documents, thick enough to change everything. He spread them across the flimsy motel table, his fingers tapping the pages. "These," he said, "are proof that your husband isn't just cruel, he's corrupt." Ava blinked, too stunned to move. She picked up one sheet, her eyes scanning the numbers and signatures. Offshore accounts, shell companies, bribes disguised as consulting fees. It was a spiderweb of deception, so intricate it made her stomach turn. Liam leaned closer. Damien's empire isn't as solid as he wants the world to believe. Half of his fortune is tied to fraud. If these documents reach the right people, his empire collapses. Ava's heart raced. She had lived for years under the shadow of Damien's wealth, believing he was untouchable. To see evidence that he wasn't just powerful, but criminal, was like seeing cracks in a prison wall. For the first time, she felt a spark, small, fragile, but real. Hope. "But why are you showing me this?" she asked quietly. Suspicion crept in again. "You worked with him once. You were his friend." Liam's jaw tightened. "I was his lawyer. I saw things I shouldn't have. I stayed silent for too long. But then I saw what he did to you. That was the last straw." He paused, his gaze steady. "I can't erase the past, Ava, but I can help you now. The question is, are you ready to fight?" Her hand trembled as she set the paper down. The image of Damien kicking her at the gala flashed in her mind, the laughter of his friends ringing in her ears. She thought of the lies printed in the newspapers, of Roxanne's smirk, of her child growing inside her, unwanted by its own father. Ava lifted her chin. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Yes, I'll fight." Liam nodded once, as if he had been waiting for that answer. He began to outline the first steps, discreetly leaking small pieces of information to trusted journalists, planting doubt in the boardroom, forcing Damien's allies to question their loyalty. "It won't happen overnight," he warned. "But the moment he realizes you're not broken, he'll come after you harder than ever. You need to be ready." Ava looked at the papers again, her heart pounding. For years, Damien held all the power. Now, for the first time, she held a weapon. And when she finally decided how to use it, the city would no longer whisper about her humiliation. They would roar about her revenge. For the first time in weeks, Ava felt a sliver of strength. Liam's documents had given her something Damien could never take back: power. But power in the wrong hands could also be a curse, and Ava was about to learn just how dangerous it could be. She needed someone to talk to, someone familiar, someone who knew her, before Damien turned her life into a cage. That's when she thought of Claire. Claire Evans had been Ava's closest friend since college. They had shared dorm rooms, late-night pizza, and secrets only best friends knew. When Ava married Damien, Claire had been her maid of honor, smiling through tears as she gave a speech about true love. Over the years, their friendship had thinned under the weight of Damien's controlling schedule, but Ava never doubted Claire's loyalty. If anyone could understand her pain, it would be Claire. So, Ava dialed her number. To her surprise, Claire answered quickly, her voice soft and worried. "Ava? Oh my God, I saw the headlines. Are you okay?" The sound of concern made Ava's chest ache. She poured out everything: her humiliation at the gala, Damien's cruelty, the lies in the press. Claire listened without interruption, her tone gentle, her words soothing. "You don't deserve this," Claire whispered. "Damien has always been too much. Tell me what you need, I'll help." Relief washed over Ava. For the first time since her world shattered, she felt less alone. She agreed to meet Claire at a quiet cafe downtown. The meeting felt like stepping back in time. Claire hugged her tightly, her perfume familiar, her smile unchanged. Ava's guard dropped. Over coffee, she confided in Claire about Liam, about the documents, about her plan to fight back. She spoke in hushed tones, terrified of being overheard, but desperate to share her burden with someone she trusted. Claire nodded sympathetically, her hand covering Ava's. "You're stronger than you think," she said warmly. "But Damien won't let this go." Be careful, Ava. What Ava didn't see was the flicker in Claire's eyes, the hesitation of someone weighing loyalty against temptation. Because 2 days later, Damien received an envelope. Inside were copies of the very documents Liam had given Ava, along with a handwritten note. She's planning to use this against you. Thought you should know. C. Damien smirked as he read the files. His rage at Ava's defiance turned into amusement. So she thinks she can fight me, he muttered. To Roxanne, who lounged nearby, he chuckled. I always told you, everyone has a price, even her friends. When Ava called Claire again, her friend's tone had shifted. She was distant, distracted, full of excuses. I'm just busy with work, Claire said quickly before hanging up. Ava's stomach tightened with unease. Something was wrong. That night, Liam stormed into the motel room, his face grim. He dropped the newspaper on the table. The headline screamed, Damien Mitchell faces false allegations, leaked documents debunked as fake. Ava's heart stopped. Her secret weapon, the one thing giving her hope, was now in Damien's hands. He had twisted it, used it to make her look desperate and dishonest. And worst of all, someone she trusted had betrayed her. She sank into the chair, tears burning her eyes. It was Claire, she whispered. She was the only one I told. Liam's jaw clenched. Then Claire just handed Damien the first battle. He leaned closer, his eyes sharp. But the war isn't over, because Damien's empire wasn't as bulletproof as he believed, and Ava was about to discover a truth even more dangerous than betrayal. The betrayal from Claire had left Ava shaken to her core. She had always believed that Damien's cruelty was the sharpest knife in her life. But now she realized betrayal could also come with a smile, a hug, and the voice of a friend. If Claire could turn against her, who else could? That question became terrifying when Ava stumbled upon something about Liam. It began innocently enough. She was rummaging through the briefcase Liam had left behind in the motel while he stepped out to take a call. She wasn't snooping, not exactly, just searching for reassurance, for something solid she could hold on to. But as her hands brushed through folders and papers, she found a set of old legal documents. Contracts, memorandums, all neatly signed at the bottom. Her blood ran cold. The name on the signature line was unmistakable. Damien Mitchell. Ava froze, her mind spinning. Liam hadn't just known Damien. He had represented him. He had been Damien's lawyer. When Liam returned, he immediately noticed the paper in her hand. His expression hardened, and for the first time, Ava saw something in his eyes she hadn't before. Guilt. You worked for him, Ava whispered, her voice breaking. You were his lawyer. You protected him. You built his empire. Liam shut the door quietly, his jaw tight. Yes, years ago, before I knew what kind of man he really was. But Ava's chest tightened with panic. How can I trust you? For all I know, you're still working for him. Maybe this is all a setup. Maybe you're just another one of his traps. The words sliced through the air. Liam didn't flinch, but his silence was worse than anger. Finally, he spoke, his tone low and steady. You're right. I did protect him once. I signed deals that I regret. I turned a blind eye when I shouldn't have. But I walked away the day I realized he wasn't just ruthless. He was dangerous. And I've been waiting for the right chance to undo the damage ever since. Ava shook her head, tears filling her eyes. Do you expect me to believe that? After Claire? After everything? For a moment, the motel room felt smaller, the walls pressing in on her. Doubt clawed at her chest. Had she placed her survival, her child's future, in the hands of another man who could betray her? Liam stepped closer, his voice firmer now. If I wanted to betray you, I already could have. Damien trusts no one, but he still underestimates me. That's his mistake. I know his secrets better than anyone, and that makes me more dangerous to him than you can imagine. Still, Ava's doubts lingered. She thought of the kick at the gala, the humiliation, the betrayal by Claire. Everyone around her seemed to have a price. How could she be sure Liam wasn't just waiting for his? The room was silent except for the hum of the neon light outside. Ava's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She wanted to believe him, but belief had burned her too many times before. Liam placed his hand on the table, palm open, steady. You don't have to trust me right now. Just trust that Damien is afraid of me. And if you stay by my side, that fear will become his downfall. Ava stared at him, torn between suspicion and hope. She thought of her unborn child, of the life she wanted to protect, of the empire she wanted to see crumble. Slowly, she set the document back on the table. But deep inside, a chilling question haunted her. Was Liam truly her savior, or the deadliest betrayal yet to come? For weeks, Ava had been silent. The media had painted her as unstable, Damien had paraded Roxanne as his new queen, and even her closest friend had betrayed her. But silence was no longer an option. If Damien's world was built on image, then she would strike at the one place he never expected: public perception. It began with a phone call. Liam handed her a list of journalists who had once admired Damien but had since been cut out of his favor. Men and women who had sniffed out his corruption but were silenced with money or threats. "They're hungry for the truth," Liam told her. "If you speak, they'll listen. And once your voice is out there, Damien won't be able to erase it." The thought terrified her. Ava had never been one for public speaking. She was an art curator once, happiest in quiet galleries, her voice hushed in reverence for paintings centuries old. But this wasn't about comfort anymore. This was survival. This was justice. She agreed. 2 days later, Ava walked into a small studio tucked away in the heart of the city. Cameras, lights, microphones, it was overwhelming. She wore no diamonds, no designer gowns, just a simple navy dress and the quiet dignity of a woman who had been broken but refused to stay that way. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Naomi Price, leaned forward and asked softly, "Ava, why are you here today?" For a moment, Ava's throat closed. Her palms dampened. She could almost hear Damien's mocking voice in her head. "You're nothing without me. No one cares what you have to say." But then she thought of her unborn child. She thought of the night at the gala, of the kick, of the laughter that still echoed in her nightmares. And she spoke. Her voice trembled at first, but as she continued, it grew stronger. She told the world about the humiliation, the lies, the control. She spoke of the accounts Damien had frozen, the isolation, the fear. She didn't frame herself as a victim, but as a woman determined to protect her child and reclaim her dignity. By the end of the interview, tears shimmered in her eyes. "I don't want pity," she said firmly. "I want truth. And I want people to see Damien Mitchell for what he really is." When the segment aired, it exploded. The internet was divided. Some still mocked her, clinging to the lies Damien had fed them. But others, many others, believed her. Hashtags trended overnight: "Stand with Ava," "Justice for her." For the first time, the narrative wasn't controlled by Damien's PR machine. It was hers. Damien's reaction was swift and furious. Within hours, his lawyers issued statements calling her delusional and vindictive. Roxanne, ever eager to play the supportive partner, posted glamorous photos of herself with Damien, captioned with lines like, "Love wins over lies." But beneath the glossy smiles, cracks were beginning to show. Investors called for explanations. Board members whispered about instability. Ava sat in the motel room, scrolling through comments online. For every cruel word, there were 10 that lifted her up. For the first time in months, she felt seen. Not as Damien's wife, not as a scandal, but as Ava, a woman with a voice. Liam watched her quietly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You just lit the first fire," he said, "and Damien is about to learn what it feels like to burn." But Ava didn't yet know. Damien's next move would not just target her reputation. It would strike at the very core of her identity. The interview had been a turning point. For the first time, Ava's voice had cut through Damien's carefully curated image. The world had seen her pain, her resilience, her humanity. But for Damien Mitchell, it wasn't just an embarrassment. It was war. And Damien never played fair. 2 days after the interview aired, headlines flooded the internet again. Only this time, the story wasn't about Ava's courage. It was about her supposed instability. Exclusive, leaked records show Ava Mitchell's history of mental health struggles. Damien Mitchell's estranged wife, unfit to be a mother. Ava's heart dropped as she read the articles. Screenshots of what looked like official hospital documents filled her phone screen. Medical notes suggesting she had once been treated for episodes of paranoia and emotional instability. It was a lie. She had never stepped foot in a psychiatric clinic. But the documents were convincing, stamped, signed, and leaked with surgical precision. She slammed her phone down, her hands shaking. "He forged them," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He actually forged them." Liam sat across the room, his expression grim but unsurprised. This is Damien's playbook. When he can't silence someone, he destroys their credibility. The impact was immediate. Talk shows debated her fitness as a mother. Comment sections overflowed with venom. She's crazy. Poor Damien, stuck with a hysterical wife. She should never raise that baby. It wasn't just words. The hospital where Ava had been receiving prenatal care called, informing her that due to concerns, her appointments would be reassessed. Even her landlord at the dingy motel hinted she might not be welcome if the press continued swarming outside. Everywhere she turned, the walls closed in. Damien's power was suffocating. Late that night, Ava curled up on the thin motel bed, tears streaking her face. "I can't do this," she whispered. "He's going to take everything, even my baby." Liam knelt beside her, his voice firm but gentle. "Listen to me. Those records are fake. I know because I've seen how Damien operates. He creates lies so believable that the truth gets buried. But that's also his weakness. If we expose even one forgery, his whole empire of lies collapses." Ava looked up at him, her eyes swollen but fierce. "How?" Liam opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Because the doctor whose name is on these records? He's been dead for 5 years. Damien didn't even bother to check. And once we prove that, the world will start questioning everything else he's done." Hope flickered, fragile but real. Ava wiped her tears, determination building again. For every trap Damien laid, she would find a way to claw herself free. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the child growing inside her. But Damien wasn't finished. That very night, his team released another bombshell, a video of Ava, secretly recorded months earlier during a private argument where she cried hysterically as Damien coldly walked away. The clip was edited to make her look unstable, her sobs amplified, her words twisted. The internet erupted again. Ava's pain had been turned into a weapon against her. She stared at the screen, her fists clenched, her whole body trembling. She had thought the interview was her breakthrough. Instead, Damien had turned it into her downfall. And as she sat in the darkness, Ava realized, if Damien could twist her tears into madness, he might be capable of something even darker. The storm outside pounded against the motel's thin windows, rain hammering like a relentless drum. Ava sat on the edge of the bed, her body exhausted but her mind restless. Ever since Damien's forged medical records had nearly destroyed her, she lived in constant fear of his next move. But fear had also sharpened her. She no longer thought of herself as powerless. She was searching, observing, waiting. That night, Liam returned with another file. He tossed it on the table, his expression unreadable. "I pulled this from an old storage unit tied to one of Damien's shell companies. It might be nothing, but it could be everything." Ava's pulse quickened as she opened the folder. Inside was a thick document, stamped and notarized. The words at the top made her heart stop. "Last will and testament of Damien Mitchell." Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The will was dated 3 years ago, long before Roxanne. Damien had carefully outlined the distribution of his empire. What startled Ava most was a single clause written in bold legal language. "In the event of my death, the majority of my estate and controlling shares of my corporations are to be transferred to my legal spouse and the firstborn child of said marriage." Ava stared at the words, unable to breathe. It wasn't Roxanne. It wasn't anyone else. It was her. Her and the baby she carried. She looked up at Liam, her voice shaking. "Do you understand what this means?" Liam nodded slowly. "It means Damien's entire empire, everything he's built, doesn't belong to him alone. The moment your child is born, you and that child become the legal heirs to everything he's tried to steal from you." 1,000 emotions crashed into Ava at once. Rage, hope, fear. Damien had spent years belittling her, humiliating her, trying to erase her from existence. Yet in black and white, the law bound his empire to her unborn child. No matter how much he flaunted Roxanne, no matter how many lies he told, the truth was clear. His legacy depended on the woman he tried to destroy. For the first time, Ava laughed. It was bitter, broken, but real. "He thought he could throw me away like trash, but all along his empire was tied to me." Liam leaned closer, his eyes sharp. "That's why he's so desperate. That's why he's trying to break you before the baby comes. If you're gone, or if the world believes you're unfit, the board could move to strip your rights. He knows the clock is ticking." The realization hit Ava like a blow. Damien wasn't just cruel. He was calculating. Every smear campaign, every forged record, every humiliation, It wasn't just about pride. It was about control. He was preparing the world to reject her claim when the time came. Her laughter died, replaced with cold resolve. She traced the bold words of the will with her finger. Then I'll fight, not just for me, not just for my child, but for everything he tried to steal. This time, Damien won't win. Outside, thunder shook the motel walls. Ava closed the folder, her decision made. But as Liam locked the documents back in his briefcase, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and for the first time, Ava saw fear flicker across his face. "What is it?" she demanded. Liam's voice was tight, urgent. "Damien knows we found the will, and he's already moving to destroy it." And in that instant, Ava realized her child's future, and the empire Damien tried to erase her from, was in greater danger than ever. The rain had cleared by morning, but Ava's storm was only beginning. The will had changed everything. For weeks, she had been on the defensive, a woman cornered, painted as unstable and powerless. But now she had something Damien couldn't bury, a legal document that tied his entire empire to her and the child she carried. "Use it," Liam said as they sat in the motel room, sunlight slicing through the blinds. "Don't hide this. Don't wait for him to destroy it. Make the world see that no matter what he does, you and your child are the future of his empire." Ava hesitated. The thought of going public again terrified her. The last time she'd spoken out, Damien had smeared her with forged records and edited videos. But this time, she wasn't speaking from pain. This time, she was armed with proof. She nodded slowly. "No more whispers, no more hiding. If Damien built his power on lies, then I'll burn it down with the truth." Within days, Ava reappeared in public, not in the shadows of a motel, not as a broken woman, but as someone transformed. She arrived at a financial summit, one of the city's most prestigious events, her figure poised in a sleek black dress that commanded respect rather than pity. Liam walked at her side, not as her savior, but as her ally, carrying the briefcase that held Damien's secret. The room fell silent when she entered. Bankers, investors, socialites, people who had once turned away from her, now whispered in awe. She stood at the podium, her voice steady, her gaze unflinching. "For months I've been silenced," Ava began. "Lies were told about me. Records were forged. My dignity was stripped away. But today, I bring the truth. Not just about me, but about Damien Mitchell." Gasps echoed as she revealed the will, holding it up for the cameras. Flashbulbs exploded, capturing every detail. She read aloud the clause that secured her and her child as the heirs to Damien's empire. "This is not my opinion. This is his own signature, his own words." The audience buzzed with disbelief. Investors shifted uncomfortably. Journalists scribbled furiously. The narrative was no longer Ava the hysterical wife, it was Ava the rightful heir. Back in his penthouse, Damien watched the broadcast, his face pale with rage. Roxanne stood behind him, clutching her phone, her smile frozen. "She's ruining everything," Damien growled. He slammed his glass against the table, shards scattering across the floor. "I won't let her take what's mine." For Ava, the moment was both terrifying and liberating. The world was finally listening, not to Damien's lies, but to her truth. Yet even as the applause rose in the summit hall, she felt the weight of what was coming. Damien wouldn't retreat. He wouldn't surrender. He would strike harder, faster, more ruthlessly than ever. Later that night, as she returned to the motel, Ava found herself standing in front of the mirror. She no longer saw the broken woman who had been kicked to the ground at the gala. She saw a mother, a fighter, a woman who had been underestimated for too long. But just as resolve steadied her, Liam entered the room, his phone still in his hand, his face grave. "We may have moved too fast," he said. Ava's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Liam locked eyes with her, his voice sharp. "Damien isn't just fighting back in the media anymore. He's petitioning the court to declare you unfit to raise your child, and he's bribed people in high places to make it happen." In that moment, Ava realized the battle was no longer just about reputation. It was about the very right to keep her baby. The morning after Ava's triumphant reveal of Damien's will, the city buzzed with speculation. News anchors debated legal clauses, investors whispered in hushed tones, and for the first time, Damien's name was tied to weakness rather than power. But while Ava tasted her first real victory, Damien was already planning his deadliest counterattack. He would take the one thing she loved most, the child growing inside her. By noon, court documents were filed. Damien's legal team petitioned the family court to declare Ava Mitchell mentally unfit to parent her unborn child. The forged medical records, the edited videos of her crying, the endless tabloid headlines, all were compiled into a thick dossier of evidence. The petition claimed Ava posed a danger to the child, that she was unstable, erratic, and incapable of making sound decisions. Damien presented himself as the only suitable guardian, a stable billionaire who could provide safety and opportunity. The irony was sickening. The man who had kicked his pregnant wife in public now positioned himself as the baby's savior. When Liam read the petition aloud in the motel room, Ava nearly collapsed. Her hands clutched her belly, her breaths coming in sharp gasps. "He's trying to steal my baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's going to rip my child away before it's even born." Liam knelt beside her, his tone firm. "Listen to me. This is desperation. Damien knows he's losing control, so he's going after the only thing that still gives you strength. But we can fight this. We will fight this." But Ava's mind spiraled. She imagined her child growing up in Damien's mansion, raised by Roxanne, taught to despise the mother who had carried them. The thought was unbearable. Tears streamed down her face, her sobs echoing off the motel walls. The next morning, Ava was summoned to court. Cameras swarmed the steps, reporters shouting questions as she walked in with Liam at her side. She wore no jewels, no armor, but her dignity. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Damien sat across the aisle, sharp in a tailored suit, his arm draped casually around Roxanne. He looked calm, collected, the picture of control. Ava's stomach turned at the sight. Damien's lawyers presented their case first. They painted Ava as fragile, hysterical, reckless. They displayed the forged medical records on a giant screen. They played the edited video of her sobbing, each cry amplified for the judge to hear. Every lie twisted the knife deeper. Then it was Ava's turn. She stood, her hands trembling, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "I am not perfect," she admitted. "I've been broken, humiliated, betrayed. But I am not unstable. I am a mother, and I will fight for my child with every breath I have left." Some in the courtroom shifted, their expressions softening. For the first time, Damien's mask cracked. His jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with frustration. But then his lawyer played their final card, a surprise witness. Ava's stomach dropped as Claire Evans, her former best friend, stepped forward. Claire looked down, avoiding Ava's eyes, before saying the words that shattered the room. "I've known Ava for years, and she's not well. She needs help. I don't think she's ready to raise a child." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Ava's knees buckled. Liam caught her arm, his grip firm, his whisper urgent. "Don't give up. This isn't over." But as Ava stared at her former friend betraying her on the stand, she realized Damien wasn't just fighting for control of his empire. He was fighting to erase her completely. The courtroom betrayal had nearly crushed Ava. Watching Claire, her closest friend, stand on the witness stand and call her unfit was a wound deeper than any Damien had inflicted with his lies. For a moment, Ava wanted to collapse, to surrender, to let the fight consume her. But as she sat at the defendant's table, Liam leaned close, his voice low and steady. "Look at him. He's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. And I think I've found his." That night, Liam worked tirelessly. He combed through old files, emails, financial statements. Ava couldn't sleep. She lay awake, her hand over her belly, whispering promises to her unborn child. "I'll keep you safe, no matter what." At dawn, Liam returned, eyes bloodshot but burning with energy. He dropped a thick stack of papers onto the motel's flimsy table. "Here," he said. "This is how we turn the tide." Ava's fingers shook as she opened the folder. Inside were bank records, large transfers to obscure accounts, all tied to government officials and court clerks. Each payment was traced back to Damien's companies. "These aren't donations," Liam explained. "They're bribes. Damien has been buying influence for years. Judges, inspectors, politicians. But this one," he tapped a page, "this one went straight to the clerk overseeing your custody petition. $200,000, 3 days before the petition was filed." Ava's breath caught. "He paid to take my baby from me." Liam nodded grimly. "And if we prove this, not only will the petition collapse, but Damien will face criminal charges. He thinks he's untouchable, but he's sloppy. And sloppiness is how men like him fall." Hope flickered inside Ava. The thought of exposing Damien for what he truly was, a fraud, a manipulator, a criminal, lit a fire in her chest. But fear not at her too. If we use this, he'll come after us harder than ever. Liam's voice softened. He already has, Ava. You're fighting for your child. There's nothing left to lose, only everything to gain. The next hearing was electric. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Damien's lawyers smirked confidently, certain they'd buried Ava with Claire's testimony. But then Liam stood, calm and deliberate, and placed the bank records on the judge's desk. "Your Honor," Liam said, his voice sharp, "before this court decides on the fate of a child, I believe the court should examine the financial ties between the petitioner and certain officials." The judge's brow furrowed. Gasps echoed as Liam revealed the $200,000 transfer. He spoke with precision, each word landing like a blow. "This is not about the child's welfare. This is about money, bribes, corruption. Damien Mitchell is not protecting his child, he is purchasing custody." Damien's face turned red, his composure cracking for the first time. He slammed his fist against the table, barking at his lawyers. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, whispers filled the room. Ava sat tall, her heart pounding. For once, Damien was the one on defense. For once, the world was seeing him without the mask. The judge called for a recess, his tone grave. "This evidence will be investigated immediately. Until then, custody matters are suspended." Ava exhaled, tears slipping down her cheeks, not of despair but of relief. For the first time, it felt like justice might be within reach. Liam placed a steady hand on her shoulder, whispering, "This is the beginning of his downfall." But as they stepped out of the courthouse, cameras blinding and microphones shoving in their faces, a black car screeched to a halt across the street. The tinted window rolled down just enough for Ava to see the cold glint of Damien's eyes. And in that chilling stare, Ava realized Damien was not retreating. He was preparing his deadliest strike yet. The city's elite had gathered once again, this time at the Winter Gala, a night of opulence hosted in the glass atrium of the Crown Hotel. It was a fortress of wealth. Crystal chandeliers reflecting over fountains of champagne, strings of violins weaving through the air. For years, Damien Mitchell had owned this room. Tonight, he expected to do the same, brushing aside rumors of bribery and corruption with a smug smile and Roxanne glittering at his side. But Damien hadn't planned on Ava. For weeks, she had been silent since the last court battle. The press speculated she had retreated, broken by the betrayal of friends and the weight of Damien's power. Some whispered she had fled the city. Others said she was too ashamed to ever show her face again. Damien encouraged those rumors, telling his investors Ava was gone for good. Then the doors opened. The room hushed. Heads turned. And there she was, Ava Mitchell. No longer the trembling, humiliated woman from the gala months earlier. Tonight, she stood tall in a fitted midnight blue gown, her baby bump framed with grace, her eyes steady, her posture unshakable. On her arm was Liam Cross, his presence commanding, his gaze locked ahead. Together, they cut through the glittering crowd like a blade. The whispers spread like wildfire. "That's her. She looks different. Stronger." Flashbulbs burst as photographers scrambled to capture the moment. Damien froze mid-laugh, his glass hovering in his hand. Roxanne clutched his arm, her smile faltering. For the first time, the king of the room looked cornered. Ava didn't need a microphone. Her presence was louder than any speech. She greeted guests with calm confidence, her smile subtle but unyielding. Investors who had once turned their backs now leaned in, eager to shake her hand. Board members murmured among themselves, eyes darting between Damien and Ava, weighing the balance of power. And then, the moment came. The host of the evening announced a surprise guest speaker, Ava Mitchell. Gasps erupted as she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight bathing her in silver light. Damien's jaw clenched, his knuckles white around his glass. "Good evening," Ava began, her voice clear and steady. "Some of you may know me as Damien Mitchell's wife. Others may know me as the woman you read about in tabloids. Tonight, I want you to know me for who I truly am. A mother, a fighter, and the rightful heir to the empire Damien has tried to erase me from." The room erupted in murmurs, cameras clicking furiously. Ava held up a document, the will. Its bold clauses, signed by Damien himself, lit up the projector behind her. "This is not gossip. This is law. My child and I are the future of this empire, whether Damien Mitchell accepts it or not." Damien surged to his feet, shouting, "This is a lie. She forged it." But the cracks in his mask were visible. His rage only fed the whispers around the room. Ava didn't flinch. She looked straight at him, her eyes cold. "You can forge medical records, you can edit videos, but you cannot erase your own signature." The crowd gasped, some applauding, others exchanging stunned glances. Investors pulled out their phones, already texting. Board members avoided Damien's glare. In that moment, Ava had stolen the room. Roxanne's grip on Damien's arm tightened, her smile brittle. For the first time, she realized Ava wasn't just surviving, she was winning. And as Ava stepped off the stage, her chin high, Damien's glass shattered against the floor. Because Ava hadn't just reclaimed her dignity, she had declared war, and Damien's empire was beginning to crumble in front of his own eyes. The Winter Gala had been a disaster for Damien Mitchell. Ava's return, her strength, and the revelation of the will had shaken his empire to its foundation. For the first time in years, investors doubted him. Board members questioned him. Whispers of removals circled like vultures, and Roxanne Croft could feel it. She had spent months believing she was untouchable, the queen to Damien's king. But as she stood in the glittering atrium, watching the room shift toward Ava, panic coiled in her chest. Damien was slipping, and if he fell, she would be dragged down with him. That night, back in his penthouse, Damien raged. He smashed glasses, hurled papers, shouted until his voice cracked. "She humiliated me, in front of everyone. I will destroy her." Roxanne tried to soothe him, placing a manicured hand on his shoulder. "Darling, calm down. We'll spin this. We always do." But Damien shoved her hand away. Don't kid yourself. You're nothing without me. Do you think anyone would even know your name if it weren't for me?" The words stung. Roxanne's face flushed, but she forced a brittle smile. "Of course, Damien. I'm just here for you." She retreated to the bedroom, her mind racing. For months, she had played the role of loyal mistress, clinging to Damien's power. But now she saw what Ava had always known. Damien's loyalty was to no one. He would discard Roxanne the second she stopped being useful. And Roxanne had no intention of being discarded. The next morning, as Damien met with his lawyers, Roxanne slipped out, clutching her phone like a weapon. On that phone was a secret she had kept hidden for months. A video she had recorded at the very first gala, when Damien had kicked Ava in front of his friends. She had captured it not out of pity, but as insurance. Insurance she never thought she'd need. Until now. By evening, the video was everywhere. News outlets replayed it on a loop. Damien's polished shoes slamming into Ava's swollen belly, her cry of pain echoing through the ballroom, the horrified gasps of onlookers. The proof was undeniable, the cruelty inescapable. No PR spin, no forged records, no lies could erase what the world now saw with their own eyes. The backlash was immediate. Investors withdrew. Politicians distanced themselves. Protesters gathered outside Damien's skyscrapers, chanting Ava's name. Hashtags exploded online. Justice for Ava. Damien exposed. Inside his office, Damien watched the footage in stunned silence, his empire collapsing around him. His phone rang endlessly, board members resigning, deals being canceled, allies abandoning him. For the first time in his life, Damien Mitchell looked afraid. And Roxanne? She smiled. When reporters asked her about the video, she tilted her head sweetly, pretending innocence. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," she said. "I had to stand with Ava. Women deserve better." Her performance was flawless, her crocodile tears convincing. Overnight, Roxanne went from villain to supposed whistleblower, basking in the sympathy of a world that had once despised her. But Ava knew the truth. She saw through Roxanne's performance. This wasn't about justice. This was about survival. Still, the damage to Damien was irreversible. His empire teetered, his name disgraced, his allies gone. He was a king with no throne, a man stripped bare for the world to see. But Ava wasn't finished. She hadn't fought this far just to watch Damien crumble quietly. She wanted justice, not just for herself, but for her child. And the final blow she planned would not only end Damien's reign, it would leave him with nothing but ashes. Damien Mitchell had once stood at the top of the world, but now the world was watching him fall. The video Roxanne released had shattered his empire. Protesters flooded the streets outside his headquarters, chanting Ava's name. Investors fled in droves, board members resigned, and his once loyal friends stopped answering his calls. Damien's face was plastered across every news outlet. no longer as the celebrated billionaire, but as the monster who had brutalized his pregnant wife. Inside his penthouse, the silence was deafening. Bottles littered the floor. His suit jacket lay crumpled on the sofa, and Damien stared out at the city that had once bowed to him. His phone buzzed relentlessly, reporters demanding answers, lawyers begging for meetings, creditors circling like sharks. But Damien ignored them all. For the first time, he was powerless. And then came the final blow. The board of directors called an emergency vote. In a single afternoon, Damien Mitchell was stripped of his position, his shares frozen pending investigation. His empire, built on greed, fear, and corruption, was gone. Roxanne, meanwhile, reveled in the chaos. She strutted in front of cameras, presenting herself as the woman brave enough to stand with Ava. For a moment, she almost convinced the world that she was a hero, not a co-conspirator. But Roxanne had forgotten one thing. Ava now had the power of truth on her side. During a press conference, Ava calmly revealed emails, proof that Roxanne had been complicit all along, working with Damien to smear her and profit from the empire. The same cameras that once celebrated Roxanne now turned against her. Headlines shifted overnight. Roxanne Croft, mistress or manipulator. From sidekick to schemer, her fall from grace. Within days, Roxanne was blacklisted from the very society she had fought so hard to enter. Friends abandoned her, brands canceled endorsements, and doors slammed shut. She became a pariah, a woman no longer admired but pitied, or worse, despised. Damien and Roxanne, once smug and untouchable, were now nothing but cautionary tales. And Ava? She stood taller than ever. The will secured her position as the legal heir. The courts, swayed by Liam's evidence of bribery and corruption, dismissed Damien's custody petition. The baby she carried was safe, protected by law and by the truth that could no longer be buried. But Ava didn't celebrate with cruelty. She didn't mock Damien or gloat in Roxanne's downfall. She stood in front of the cameras, her hand on her belly, her voice steady. "I didn't fight this battle for revenge," she said. "I fought it for justice, for my child, for every woman who has ever been silenced, humiliated, or told she wasn't enough. We are more than what people try to make of us. We are stronger than they can ever imagine." The room erupted in applause. Online, millions of viewers wept, sending messages of solidarity. Ava was no longer just a scandalous headline. She had become a symbol of resilience, of survival, of strength. But behind the applause, behind the flashing cameras, something else was stirring. Because while Damien had lost his company, his wealth, and his reputation, one thing remained: his hatred. And hatred, unchecked, is dangerous. That night, as Ava rested in her motel, exhausted but hopeful, a shadow lingered outside the window. And Ava did not yet know. The most dangerous chapter of her fight was still to come. The shadow outside the motel window vanished before Ava could notice, but Liam did. He had sensed it for days now, that Damien wasn't finished, that his hatred was still brewing even as his empire collapsed. And Liam was right. Damien's final act came one stormy night. Desperate, stripped of power and wealth, he tried to force his way into Ava's motel, determined to reclaim control the only way he knew, through fear. But Liam was there, waiting. The confrontation was brutal. Damien lunged with venom, spitting threats, calling Ava names that once crushed her. But this time, Ava didn't shrink. She stood tall, her voice steady. "You've taken enough from me," she said coldly. "You will take nothing more." The police arrived minutes later, summoned by Liam before Damien even stepped into the building. For once, Damien's wealth couldn't shield him. He was arrested on charges of harassment, fraud, and bribery. As the flashing red and blue lights carried him away, Damien shouted like a madman, but his words no longer had power. The city had already chosen whom to believe. For Ava, it was the end of a nightmare. Weeks later, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she cradled him in her arms, whispering, "You are my miracle. You are why I fought." The hospital room was filled with light, warmth, and a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. The world celebrated her victory. News outlets hailed her as the woman who brought down a billionaire. Social media called her a symbol of strength, hashtags spreading like wildfire. "Justice for Ava, rise again." She wasn't just Ava Mitchell, the humiliated wife. She was Ava Mitchell, survivor, mother, warrior. But there was one more chapter left to write. One evening, weeks after the baby's birth, Liam invited Ava to a small rooftop garden overlooking the city skyline. The air was cool, stars scattered across the night sky, the hum of traffic far below. Ava wore a simple dress, her hair loose, her baby asleep in the stroller beside her. She hadn't expected anything more than quiet company. But Liam turned to her, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Ava's breath caught as he dropped to one knee. "Ava," he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "When I first stepped into that hospital room, I saw a woman the world had tried to break. But what I've seen since then is someone unshakable. You fought for truth, for your child, and for yourself. You don't need saving. You never did. But I would be honored to stand by you, to protect you, to love you for the rest of our lives." He opened the box. Inside was not a massive diamond, but a modest, elegant ring, timeless, understated, like him. Tears blurred Ava's vision. For years, she had lived in the shadow of a man who saw her as less. Now, here was a man who saw her as more than enough. She whispered, her voice breaking, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Liam slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. For the first time, Ava felt not just safe, but truly cherished. Behind them, the baby stirred softly, the future waiting. Ava looked out at the city skyline, her heart full. Damien had tried to erase her, Roxanne had tried to replace her. But she had risen, stronger than ever. And now, with her child in her arms and a man who truly valued her by her side, she knew one thing for certain. Her story was no longer one of humiliation. It was one of triumph, justice, and love. So, my friends, the story has finally come to an end. You're still here with me, right? If you've stayed until this moment, it means something in Ava's journey touched your heart in a very real way. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded you of your own struggles, your own battles, and the quiet strength you carry inside. Her story wasn't just about betrayal or revenge, it was about resilience, about finding light in the darkest places. The Stoics often said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That is exactly what Ava discovered. She couldn't control Damien's cruelty or Roxanne's betrayal, but she chose how to rise, how to fight, and how to protect what mattered most. And isn't that the lesson for all of us? We can't always change what happens, but we can choose how we respond. We can choose dignity, courage, and healing. So if this story moved you, share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. Don't forget to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss another story like this. Together, we heal. Together, we rise.